Colin Trevorrow's Jurassic World Dominion is supposed to be the ultimate conclusion to the beloved Jurassic Park franchise. I really wanted to love this movie. I was hyped for it all the way, and I did enjoy it. However, it's not really a finale or conclusion as much as just a fancy way of saying they're not making any more of these movies. Which is a bummer because there were so many interesting directions they could take the franchise and still can. But the fact of the matter is that this film is not a conclusion to the franchise. So today we're going to be talking about my thoughts on the film and how the sixth and final installment ultimately became a cinematic disappointment. But before we continue on, I first want to tell you about this new thing I started. And it started with this little video of The Lost World where I placed my own guess on the unexplained sequences of films. I guess you could kind of call it a movie theory. Now, I'm not going to spend nearly as much of my time or effort on these kind of videos, but will most likely continue making them. Anyways, back to Dominion. So you're probably wondering what I mean by this film not being the finale to the franchise. After all, it is the last film, but this film is not a conclusion to the franchise because it does not conclude what we've been building up to with these three new films, and that's largely due to it not being a payoff for what came before. Now, this is a huge thing that factors into nearly every aspect of the film, but I'm going to start with the biggest and most important: continuation and plot. So what do I mean by continuation? To put it simply, this film should continue the story of Fallen Kingdom. If you remember from Fallen Kingdom's ending, the remaining dinosaurs from Isla Nublar were released into the world. This is our big setup for the final film. So what happens? How are humans going to coexist with these monstrosities? Or will we kill them all off? What's the ultimate payoff to this? Well, there isn't one. And this was so strange to me when I saw the film play out. We see a few instances of humans and dinosaurs in the same world, but that's it. There's no payoff to the setup in Fallen Kingdom, which just kind of makes Maisie's decision in that film less impactful. We came in wondering, how in the world are we going to live with dinosaurs? How will they change our world because of it? This will have a huge impact on the world and story. Right? No big walls or fences or perimeters. We can just go about in the open all over the world. Dinosaurs aren't a problem in the least. But what's even stranger is the end decision to this question. Like, okay, the film doesn't really address the situation. There's got to be some payoff for it, right? The payoff? They're going to build a sanctuary for the dinosaurs. They're going to build a wall. Separate them from the outside world. You know, like Site B, but not on a remote island. But come to think of it, why wasn't this the ending? Round up as many dinosaurs as you can and send them all to Isla Sorna. I mean, you even had Owen in the beginning rounding up dinosaurs. You could have used that to your advantage somehow, but nope. Next is one of, if not the most vital parts of the entire film, which is the plot. Or in this case, you could even say plots. This is one of those films where we follow two separate groups until they meet together for the big third act finale, which isn't a bad thing. There's a lot of films that do that. And since we get some great action set pieces because of it, like this one, I loved this scene. But there's one major issue with the plot, and that is, it's not about the dinosaurs. So the main plot is that there are locusts harvesting crops, and this will cause a major crisis in the food chain, and we follow our legacy characters by getting a DNA sample to prove that they were genetically engineered to control the food supply. You know, it sounds kind of funky now that I'm saying that out loud, but it's not about continuing what happened in Fallen Kingdom. It doesn't have anything to do with the dinosaurs, even in the slightest. The only potential connection is that the locusts were genetically engineered like the dinosaurs were. That's it. And I think the writers knew this, which is why they also put in a second plot, or more like a subplot, of Owen and Claire trying to get Maisie and Beta, the baby raptor, back from the poachers. Now you may feel like that this was the actual main plot of the film since it follows the characters we saw in the last film, but I see this as a secondary plot because in the end, getting Maisie and Beta back are purely to solve the problem of the locusts. So it's now intertwined with the plot of the locusts. You see the issue here? The entire plot focuses away from the setup of Fallen Kingdom and instead to some issue that has nothing to do with dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, or even a single one of our characters. And because of this, we just don't care. I'm sure many people could say that they had no interest in this major plot whatsoever. That's also due to the lack of stakes. So apparently this is a problem because the locusts are harvesting all the crops except those of Biosyn. But we as the audience have no investment in the problem because, well, what are the stakes? What'll happen if we fail? It's not like they need a certain vegetation for the dinosaurs Claire has been rescuing from poachers, which would have made a big difference in the story. I think that would have helped quite a bit. This is never presented as a real problem we have to worry about. And so why should we? And this is by far my biggest problem with the film, personally, and why it ended up being a bit of a disappointment, even though it was a big name to live up to begin with. And like I said earlier, it's not just the plot that has this problem of setup and no payoff. It's actually a rather frightening amount of different plot points and character arcs throughout the film. But let's not waste any time and jump right in, shall we? Because I've got one heck of a list of them. Okay, so in Fallen Kingdom, we had the twist of Maisie being a clone of Lockwood's daughter, Charlotte. However, the new twist is a bit of a retcon of this, as we learn that Maisie was actually a duplicate, but born from her mother who could reproduce asexually all on her own and died to a severe cause from it, which he fixed in Maisie.
Movie science.
This is mostly just in the film to explain the same thing happening to Blue. But this is never really explained any further, like was Charlotte herself genetically engineered and had been tested on so she could have this ability, which would seem the case since Blue, a specifically genetically engineered species, could do the same. And not only is this payoff not explained in the grand scheme of things, it also only serves as a payoff to the plot of The Locust, which brings us back to the main problem I mentioned earlier. And while we're speaking of characters, Dr. Henry Wu's arc in this film is quite honestly one of the worst I've seen. He seems to regret his decision of genetically engineering the Locust. No, not the dinosaurs that massacred possibly hundreds to thousands. He regrets the locusts that are wiping out fields, and thus he has his arc to use the DNA to stop the locust spread and kill them all. It's not an arc that is driven from his insane and twisted actions in the other films leading to this, and his arc isn't because of him going too far off the edge with the genetics like it should have been. And it also doesn't help that when he has his arc, the real problem isn't even the locusts, as much as the fire they've started and getting Maisie and Beta to a safe, secure location, since they are the key. And throughout the film, there are even smaller yet would have been hugely impactful ones like this. Like when we see Dodson with the can Nedry used from the original film. Assuming they had not yet found what was inside, this could have been an interesting payoff, as we could see that Nedry's death would actually have a purpose nearly 30 years later. But nope, Dodson drops it, and it's again lost forever, which just proves that it was in the film for fan service and fan service alone. Or what about when Ian reaches Alan, Ellie, and Maisie in the Amber Mines and has to punch in a number code? This could have used nostalgia to its advantage and maybe make it a date the audience knows from the other films, and even show Malcolm's way of thinking to figure it out, because after all, he is a mathematician. But not only do we not know what Ian pressed or what the actual code is, unless we were somehow able to get all of that, must have quick eyes, but the film showed us that Ian wasn't even the one who opened the gate. It was Ramsey, which just completely undoes the moment. This also means that Ian's only purpose for being there is for the vehicle that will transport them to the next plot point, location, where they happen to find Owen, Claire, and the pilot, Kayla, for the big action sequence. How convenient. Or heck, the film even hints at Alan not having a good life even though he's back to a life of paleontology, and it just ends up as telling Ellie, I wasn't happy with my life, and then they kiss. For some reason. That was weird. Now this might feel like I'm just nitpicking here, but the truth is, all of these fall victim to the same single problem, and had they fixed this with the plot, chances are the rest of the story would have improved as well. Now if I were to nitpick, I could also point out issues where the film makes things a little too easy just so that things can happen. For instance, you need Maisie and Beta to be able to escape custody? Just leave the freaking key in the same room with them. It'll be fine.
Nah, it'll be fine.
Need Alan and Ellie to get the sample and escape without being detected? Well, live security feed is no longer a thing, I guess. But that's not to say this is necessarily a bad movie and doesn't have any redeeming qualities. Trust me, it does. There is one good payoff in this film. Throughout the 3 films, Dr. Wu has been attempting to make the perfect hybrid. We started with the Indominus Rex, and Hoskins said the plan was to size it down and use it as a military weapon. Then we got the Indoraptor, a prototype yet massive progression for this plan. And in Dominion, Though the film doesn't center around it like Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom did, it still gives a somewhat reasonable payoff to Henry Wu's work. When in Valida, Owen, Claire, and Barry are targeted by the Atrociraptors, which apparently Ingen and Dr. Wu have now weaponized with the laser technology from the Indoraptor. It's the kind of creature they've been wanting to perfect since the beginning. It's nice to see that all that work with hybrids in the previous films didn't go to waste, at least not complete waste. This still could have been a major increment in the story. And so all of that was why Jurassic World Dominion was a bit of a disappointing end to the franchise, and not the epic finale it deserved to be.